To our regular Zoom-based gynae-oncology weekly session. Today is our tumor board, and today's participating medical college is Faridpur Medical College. Faridpur Medical College, it is 140 kilometers from Dhaka city. And our faculties today are from the Rajiv Gandhi Cancer Institute and Research Centers. There Dr. Ripunder Shekhun, ma'am is the Senior Consultant at Chief Gynae Oncology, Rajiv Gandhi Cancer Center, and Dr. Vinay Talwar sir is the Medical Director in medical oncology in Rajiv Gandhi Cancer Center, and Dr. Shorupa Mitro, she is the radiation oncologist in genitourinary and GI malignancy. And I request today our president of this session, our chairperson, Dr. Professor M.S. Hi, sir. He is sick, so I request our scientific secretary, Dr. F.M. Kamaluddin, to start the session. Kamal bhai, please. Kamal bhai, are you here? Kamal bhai, are you here? Kamal bhai?
So, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good evening to everybody. I welcome you all on behalf of Oncology Club for today's tumor board. So, today we are fortunate to have three faculties, all from our very friend organization. I will say that Rajiv Gandhi Cancer Institute. So, we can say that our co-organization of Oncology Club. We are fortunate to be an academic partner of that institute. So, we have Professor Dr. Vinay Talwar, who is the Director of Medical Oncology. We have Dr. Rupinder Sikhan, very common face. Almost every session we see her, the head of Gynae Oncology Department, and also our very good friend Sarupa Mitra, who claims that she can talk Bengali, speak Bengali, and cook Bengali also. So she is also very near and dear to us. So welcome all the foreign faculties. And today, as you heard, we will be sharing the experience of a medical college, Faridpur. Faridpur is a very important place because many of, the legendary people of this continent even came from Faridpur, including our first Prime Minister. So that's why it is a very important place, and we will be sharing the experience and limitation of the center, and we will try to give some way out how to way forward. So Shahana, without wasting any more time, I think we can start.
Thank you, Kamal bhai. Thank you very much. I request Mrs. Fatima Shorna to show the poll questions at first.
Sure, ma'am.
Yes. Poll voting is started. Every participants are requested for voting. Every participants are requested.
In the meantime, Rupinder, may I take the opportunity that we are thinking of going for an MOU with ECOI as an academic. You know, we are doing so many things combined. Maybe some official collaboration may help to expand the window. So maybe I will be sending a formal letter to you so that it can be discussed in your platform and we can carry it forward. So please unmute. I cannot hear you, Rupinder.
Second question, second.
No, I said, sure, you're most welcome. In fact, we don't even need an MOU. We are already working together on so many occasions, but yes, of course, definitely. If you
see that now you are in there, but maybe, but if it is a long-term MOU, even we are not there in the, the driving wheel, but
yes.
carry it forward. So it
Yeah.
becomes more an official organizational things that I was thinking, and we discussed in our community, and probably we are going to make a proposal. And then maybe we can plan some joint educational program. What we are doing, but more structured thing and evaluable thing. So somebody joining in a program, in the end of the program, we do some evaluation, maybe some certification, some this type of thing, module we are thinking.
Yeah, sure. Please do send us a mail and you can bring it forward, and then let's see how we can, kind of collaborate with all of that, and it would be very nice, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
I think we can start the session now.
Yes, please.
Yes. We are very unfortunate today that tomorrow is our holiday, that is 17th March, and the day after tomorrow is the election of the Obstetric and Gynecology Society of Bangladesh. So I think maximum gynecologists are busy with this election. So I think today's participants are minimum. Even after that, I request Dr. Samia Alom to present her case. Dr. Samia Alom. Dr. Samia Alom, she is assistant professor.
Am I audible?
Yes, she is assistant professor, Department of Obstetric and Gynecology for Phorippur Medical College Hospital. Yeah.
Madam, am I audible?
Yes.
Are my slides visible?
No, your slides are not visible.
Now visible?
Yes.
I am Dr. Samia Alom. I welcome you all, my respected chairperson, my seniors, my teachers,
Slideshow then.
distinguished foreign delegates, and all the participants. Assalamu alaikum and a very good evening. Today I am presenting a case of carcinoma cervix. My patient, 40 years old, housewife, wife of a rickshaw puller, mother of 4 children, was admitted in Phorippur Medical College Hospital on 6th March, complaining of foul-smelling pervaginal discharge for 8 months and bleeding for several days. She had history of hysterectomy 1.5 years back due to abnormal fitting, abnormal uterine bleeding by local doctor. But she has no fever with her during the surgery. She was well for several months after surgery, and around 8 months after surgery, complaining of pervaginal discharge with postpartum bleeding. On examination, her ECOG performance status is 0 and she was moderately anemic. No abnormal abdominal findings was found and there was no lymphadenopathy. On perispeculum examination, a fungating irregular growth was visible within the vagina. On bimanual examination, cervix was replaced by an irregular, soft, friable fungating growth, and upper half of all the vaginal wall was involved by the growth. And on rectal examination, rectal mucosa was free, and both the parametrium were involved by the growth. This is the view of the fungating growth of cervix. Biopsy was taken from the growth and report shows invasive squamous cell carcinoma, moderately differentiated. So my diagnosis is carcinoma cervix stage 3B with incomplete surgery. Our investigation report showed hemoglobin was 9.2 gram per TL, serum creatinine was 0.9 gram per TL, chest X-ray report was normal, IBU report shows normal study, ultrasonogram of whole abdomen shows one solid cervical mass 3.1 into 2.5 centimeter at the entry end of the cervix. This is the CT scan view, which revealed cervical neoplasm infiltrating into the urinary bladder base and urinary bladder hematoma. And this is the histopathological report.
জোরে বলেন, আপনার সাউন্ড কম হচ্ছে তো, জোরে বলেন।
This is the histopathological report. জি ম্যাডাম, এখন শোনা যাচ্ছে?
আর একটু জোরে বলেন।
This is the histopathology report.
বলেন।
Now my question is, what treatment do you recommend for her?
So,
ডক্টর স্বরূপ বলেন।
so can I ask you something?
Yes, ma'am.
I think you said that the patient had a hysterectomy. Are you suggesting that it was a subtotal hysterectomy?
Probably, madam. So cervix was present.
The cervix was present. How do you say the cervix was present and that this was not merely a vault recurrence?
Madam, cervical rim was identifiable.
No. Could you make out the cervix as in the two cervical lips? Could you make that out? Because you have described a large growth over there. So, because if at all THBSO had been done, when there is a recurrence, or rather there's residual disease, or because see, only 8 months have elapsed. So we don't know. There might have been disease right in the beginning in the cervix, in the THBSO specimen which was removed. So that is one.
Yes, madam.
Okay. Secondly, if at all there is, yes, there is a cervix, do you not want to investigate further in terms of metastasis?
She was advised for CT scan of chest, but patient was too poor to afford the cost.
Okay. What about a chest X-ray?
Chest X-ray report was normal.
Okay. And what about CT whole abdomen or even an ultrasound whole abdomen? Was that done?
Yes, madam. I'm showing the slide. Ultrasonogram of whole abdomen reveals one solid cervical mass of 3.1 into 2.5 centimeter at the entry part of the cervix.
Okay. So if it is a remote area and this is all you have to do, there are 2-3 points I want to make over here. First of all, we have to know whether this is a vault growth or a cervical growth, because if it is merely a vault growth, you cannot call it a carcinoma cervix stage 3B, right? The carcinoma staging means that the organ should be there,
Yes, madam.
right?
Yes,
However,
madam.
yes, so that is an academic point. However, if we are to see that, yes, it is CSO, you cannot correctly call it a carcinoma cervix stage 3B with incomplete surgery. Okay, the surgery has not been done for the cervix at all. Okay,
Yes.
so I would much rather put it as a vault carcinoma. All right, supposing, okay, it is not vault and incomplete surgery has been done and you have, okay, then it is a stump carcinoma.
Yes, ma'am. It's a stump carcinoma.
Yes. So in all events, we see that the bilateral parametrum is involved. And before we decide further as to her treatment, I think we should be able to do a cystoscopy. Was a cystoscopy done?
No, madam. Cystoscopy was not done.
Yeah, so cystoscopy is a very simple procedure and it can be done even in the most remote areas, right? Wherever you have a scope, any kind of scope, you can do a cystoscopy even with the hysteroscope. And similarly, you can do a hysteroscopy even with the cystoscope. Okay, so and even if you have a laparoscope, the same thing, you can introduce, the scope into the urethra. The female urethra is very small, just 4 centimeters. So any kind of scope can be introduced through that, and you can have a view of the bladder. That is the advantage of having a short urethra in the females versus a long urethra in the males. So, you can easily visualize the inside of a bladder and you can dilate the bladder, you can put in saline or anything else and you can see inside. And now that is very important because it is, if you are going to treat this patient, you have to know that is there any bullous edema or is there any infiltrative growth? Because she obviously, the next step is giving her radiation. I'm sure Swarupa Mitra will be able, Dr. Swarupa Mitra will be able to tell us more about that. But the treatment modality in such a patient would definitely be radiation. However, if there is growth which is infiltrating into the bladder, and if the lateral pelvic walls are free, you might even consider an anterior exentration for her. Though the first treatment of choice would definitely be radiation, because she has not been exposed to that modality of treatment, and that is the standard of care for cervical cancer.
Can I ask one question here? What is the reason for the hematoma in the urinary bladder? Is it a fistula or is it something else?
It may be invasion, sir.
Pardon?
It may be bladder invasion.
So that means there is a cystovaginal fistula.
No, no, sir. It's bladder invasion. Maybe it's bladder invasion by the growth.
Yeah.
For that reason, sir, Rupendra ma'am, she was asked for cystoscopy to confirm the diagnosis whether it is bladder
No,
is
but
invaded.
once you have a hematoma there, then that means already some connection has already been made, or it is impending.
No, not necessarily that there is a VVF over there, not necessarily, but definitely you can have a hematoma if the growth is invading even the wall of the urinary bladder. It might not be a through and through mucosal
Yeah.
connection, but if it is invading the wall of the urinary bladder, you can have rupture of a vessel over there and a hematoma can develop there. That's
Just
quite
for discussion's sake, Dr. Shana,
Yes, sir.
if I say that you do a diversion colostomy before starting any treatment, what is your take?
Sir, the patient is in that remote area and she is so poor and it is a government hospital. In that area, they even didn't do the CT scan and they did it. They after the free of cost and from their poor fund. So they did only the ultrasound and after insisting the patients, they gave some money to them and they did the CT scan from outside the hospital because hospital CT scan machine is out of order.
No, that is okay. I'm saying
Yeah,
to take this forward,
yeah.
see, Dr. Sekho has told very clearly that before undergoing radiation, she has to undergo cystoscopy to see whether there is any major problem there in the bladder.
Yes, sir.
Second is, if you embark this patient on radiotherapy, then definitely she's going to develop a fistula, 100%.
Yes, sir.
So if that is the case, if you have to take this patient up for radiotherapy, you have to have a diversion colostomy upstairs, so that she doesn't have major problems later on. Point number 2, which again Dr. Sekho said, that other option can be exenteration if the chances of fistula are very, very high. Dr. Sekho, your comments?
Yeah, I quite agree with you. See, we can do the simple thing first is that we can put in a DJ stent. That would help. So in case again a DJ stent is not available, then of course the next thing is a PCN. That is a percutaneous nephropathy can be done. Because yes, I agree with you. There are very bright chances of they're developing a VVF or fistula once we start the radiation treatment. And if we do not stent the ureters right now, at the uretrovesical junction, there might be a stricture and she will land up with a bilateral hydronephrosis, and then leading to, and all of that process is quite silent, and it might lead to actual parenchymal damage of the kidneys. So one has to be very careful about all of this. And if you do not have facility for putting a DJ stent, then definitely one can do a percutaneous nephrostomy, that is a PCN on both the kidneys, which is quite all right. It will not prevent the fistula, but it would definitely save the kidneys.
So, Dr. Rupender, I want to bring up the discussion to the previous comment that you made, because we are having some resident here. I see that it is telling that the a complaint came out. I mean, the diagnosis, second diagnosis, after 1.5 hours of the year of first surgery. So 18 months after first surgery. So
No,
the
8 months.
18 months, not
8 months.
8 months.
8 months. Well, even more than 6 months.
Yes.
So then
Yes.
it is even after more than 6 months. So it is a very valid thing that I want to re-emphasize on the point that there it is a recurrence. It is, we cannot anymore say that it should be, I mean, more than 6 months with the interval, or if there was and with the surgery, it is a subtotal or whatever it is. As you said that, so for the student to tell it is a 3B cervical cancer will be a very suicidal thing and to justify it. I'm not talking about this case, but in the exam say, because with the gap of this, if somebody want to justify, it will be difficult to justify that it is a stage 3B, because it either you say, as she said, it is a vault recurrence, or I
Alright.
was, yes.
Some cus-
Yes, I have a question. Why do you tell that it is the recurrence? Why it is not the residual disease? At the patient was not in follow-up or
Maybe even it is a residual.
stump
To say
carcinoma?
3B,
This is a stump
this is number
carcinoma.
one. Number two,
Yeah.
number two is Rupinder, as the
Right,
paper is not adequate to say,
Yeah, Kamal Bhai, just 1 minute.
the document is not adequate to explain that
One
whether the THBLS was done or not.
Yeah, sorry.
Is there
Joseph.
any way we can assess that?
Yeah,
Sorry.
I just want to interject over here that it might be just a primary carcinoma.
Yes.
If the cervix has been left behind, it might be
Yes.
just a carcinoma, in which case the staging would be fine. So it is very important to determine that was a subtotal hysterectomy done. Now
Yes.
to do that, one would have to go back to see the histopathology for this patient. And when we are seeing the histopathology, the most important point would be to see the gross. How have they grossed it? What is the uterine length? And how much of cervix is there in that particular grossing? What is the age of the patient? So once we correlate all of these things, will we be able to actually know that was there any cervix at all with the specimen, or was it just amputated at the level of the internal loss and the specimen was just that of a subtotal hysterectomy?
Yes.
So once we have the knowledge, if it was a subtotal hysterectomy, then what we are looking at is basically a primary carcinoma cervix.
Go-
Or you can also call it stump carcinoma because the cervix is all that is left. And at event, labeling it a stage 3B disease is fine. However, if in the primary specimen there was a cervix, there is a certain amount of cervical length, however much it might have been, then in that case, this is a vault carcinoma.
Yeah.
And perhaps we cannot really label it as a stage 3B. And it might, and also that might have been a focus of say a microinvasive carcinoma or even a carcinoma in situ in the first specimen, which has now recurred, in which case we can call it a recurrence as a full-blown invasive carcinoma.
So,
So
Rupinder,
these are
we'll take your points. I am asking, say, if we don't have adequate information, let me tell you the real story. What happens? Paper written, THBLS done.
Yes.
We need to trust that paper. And the histopathology, one small piece of chunk of tissue was sent, which said, and for example, this patient, no histology was done.
Yes.
So because it was a DUB and THBLS was done. So now with this growth, is there any way which can give us a clue that whether it was a subtotal hysterectomy done or it, I mean, is there any way? I mean, just I'm not a surgeon. Can we, or we need to just assume?
So, like I said again, you see the age of the patient and try to look for some kind of imaging which would have been done, even if she's a DUB or a AUB for which the hysterectomy was done. There would be some imaging, some ultrasound would definitely be there to tell us what was the size of the uterus. Isn't it? So from that itself, we can just find out and we can correlate with the specimen which was sent and we can have a vague idea. Though finally, if you talk in practical terms to treat the patient, this is enough information and we know that how we have to go about the treatment. But from an academic point of view, that you want to label exactly, then of course all this information is required. But practically speaking, you have this carcinoma in front of you, you have a biopsy which tells you it is a squamous cell carcinoma, and you know that the modality of treatment first modality of treatment to be used over here is definitely radiotherapy.
Ultrasound report already showed that the growth arising from the anterior lip of the cervix. So the cervix is present, and also they on vaginal examination they felt the cervix and also the rectal examination. I think we had our radiation oncologist, the faculty, Dr. Sharupa Mitra ma'am. I think, and she could add something. Dr. Sharupa Mitra ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for inviting me. I'm sorry I got a little late today. So I agree with everything with Dr. Shekho ma'am has said and Dr. Talwar has said. For considering a patient for radiation, this kind of a patient, first of all, what I will take into consideration, like you said, the patient belongs to a poor socioeconomic background, and the bladder is involved. So that is very important. I need to know very well how much the bladder is involved, because I try my best to decrease the chances of a vesicovaginal fistula. So a cystoscopy, I'm sure this can be done everywhere. A cystoscopy is very, very important. Now, in case she is a patient of who can be taken up for radiotherapy, then definitely she will go for radiation chemotherapy, and followed by a brachytherapy form that we will need to decide, because she is a walled carcinoma. So she is a patient who may probably need interstitial brachytherapy. So for planning, like you said, I think you have only the conventional treatment over there. So if we plan for a conventional radiation therapy, once again that bladder, because we need to keep in mind that the bladder dose, we will not be probably able to see or monitor the bladder dose. So in such cases, the old method which we used to have, that putting a bladder block mid-treatment. So we could give, but this is again very difficult because we should not miss the bladder tumor. So in a conventional, for this patient, probably we will have to go for a conventional radiation, because I assume the IMRT or the linear accelerator is not probably there. So I would go for a radiation therapy with a midline block mid-treatment with concomitant chemotherapy after assessing the kidney functions. And after this, after the radiation is done, we would like to do an MRI, but again, I assume that probably the MRI is not available. A very good clinical examination is a must, because only external beam radiation is not enough, because that is going to give only about 45 to 50 grays of radiation. And for such a disease, at least about 75 to 80 grays are needed. So how do we do that? We need to go with a brachytherapy. Now, brachytherapy for this, since there is no uterus, we cannot go for an intracavitary radiotherapy or intracavitary brachytherapy. We need to treat the vaginal vault, and only the SORBO, that is the intraluminal brachytherapy, will not be enough. So she is definitely a candidate for interstitial brachytherapy. And even if there is, so here there is, you cannot have any compromise. We need to send the patient somewhere where the interstitial brachytherapy can be done, because there is no other way. We cannot compromise on the dose that she will require.
Okay,
a question was raised by Dr. Vineet Talwar that this lesion, there is a chance of bladder and also the rectal invasion.
Yes.
So in that case, as you said, you are trying to put a midline shield.
Yes.
But will you prefer to have a diversion colostomy to avoid this type of thing?
I would not really, because in radiation, it is not that all bladder involvement are definitely going to cause fistula. No, it is not so. Even the guidelines still, even now it says 4A bladder involvement, we go for chemoradiation. But yes, we have to be very sure whether it
setup. So at one stage, we need to move the patient to a center where we have this treatment. Otherwise, half-hearted treatment is not enough. I mean, to give some radiation, not to do the brachytherapy or the interstitial brachytherapy, this is not going to help. Rather, maybe it will detriment the situation.
Yes.
So at one stage, we need to take the further one step more initiative to move the patient from that center to a center where she can give the whole treatment.
Yeah, I would like to stress it as much as possible. Brachytherapy cannot be avoided. Even if she goes into complete response after the external radiation, brachytherapy needs to be given.
Yeah, and that is a tempting thing, Sarupa, which I am sorry, I mean, in this type of situation where we don't have a good radiotherapy facilities, some of our oncology colleagues prefer to give 2-3 cycles of chemotherapy.
Yeah.
They feel good because, you know, the bleeding has gone, tumor has regressed, patient is happy, doctors are happy, and then they may think of radiotherapy or may not until another recurrence happens. That is a more or less a common sequelae here, especially in our periphery sector.
Next.
Dr. Kamal, I would like to make a comment here.
Yes.
Before embarking on chemoradiotherapy for the benefit of the postgraduates, if the patient has hydronephrosis, hydroureteral nephrosis, it is always better to do a stenting and then proceed, because statistics show that if you don't do stenting, then these patients do poorly as compared to patients who are stented and have a good renal reserve. Just for the PG students.
Yeah, very good point, Dr.
Yes.
Vineet. And another problem we face that if we start radiation and later we try to do the stenting, sometimes it becomes challenging because after a part of radiation or end of the radiation, it becomes challenge even we cannot do a stent. Okay, we can proceed.
Is there any role of surgery after incomplete surgery in CS cervix?
Rupinder.
Yeah, see, there is definitely a role of surgery. If incomplete surgery for CS cervix has been done. But in that case, the parametrium should be soft. You know, like I think one of in our earlier webinars, we had spoken that we can do a parametrectomy, especially if the patient is young. And, you know, where we can save her adjuvant radiotherapy. But these cases are very, very few. And in
Yes.
all of these, the size of the tumor should be very less.
Yes.
And in fact, even less than 1B1. So we can do surgery, but like I said, very, very few cases. Mostly if the patient comes to us where
Yeah.
SO has been done and the diagnosis of CS cervix is post-operative, these patients should definitely be given radiation. Both EBRT as well as brachy, as Surupa has just said, because only then can they do well.
Okay. Next.
Is this treatment cure her cancer completely?
Sorry?
In this condition, in this scenario, this patient, will she be cured completely?
For a curative treatment, that was the question. So
Yeah.
this scenario, is there any hope for cure?
Hope for curative treatment.
Sarupa.
There is always hope for cure. If we give her full, if she's able to tolerate the full complement of the treatment, which involves concomitant CTRT and as well as brachytherapy, and she's, she tolerates all of it. Yes, there's definitely a chance of cure, but then that would be only about, say, 20%.
Okay. Next.
If patient develops radiation cystitis or radiation proctitis, then how will we manage her?
During the treatment, yes, this is a very common side effect. There are two kinds of radiation cystitis or proctitis, which is the acute and the chronic or the late. Not chronic, the late effect. So we are talking that during the treatment. So this is very common. With IMRT, again, the chances of acute radiation proctitis are a little less than the conventional. But for her, we will be going for the conventional radiation. So we have to counsel the patient, first of all, that radiation cystitis may develop, proctitis may develop, and it will be, we just prescribe her a diet which is less roughage, and we generally go for a milk-free diet, and counseling her and telling her that this is a temporary effect. She will be fine after the treatment is over gradually. So I think for beginning any radiation, some counseling is a very, very important part. And all these are taken well care of during the treatment, because every week we are seeing the patient, examining her, and taking a care of her side effects. And with conservative management, they are generally doing well.
Next question.
Samia,
Same.
any more question? Next.
Yes, one question. What difficult will you face during her treatment?
Where is the slide? Where is your question?
Slide is not good.
What is the question? We cannot hear you.
What difficulties will you face during the treatment?
What type of difficulties in radiation or
Yes, what type? In subtotal hysterectomy patients, if they go for the, when you go for the radiation, what type of difficulties do you face? It is for our everybody's questions. What type of, and we want you give a good message that subtotal hysterectomy, what type of difficulties you may face.
Sarupa, they are asking
yes.
for the challenge of treating a patient ball recurrence with subtotal hysterectomy.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Any cancer patient, I believe a good counseling is a must. It may take a little time, but please take out time. All students, please take out time to counsel the patient well. That way, the horrors of the treatment, you can reduce it. Many times you need to make the patient talk to another patient who has already taken the treatment. So these things are required, and please take out time to counsel the patient. Then enumerate her, like the cystitis is one which may be difficult for the patient to go through, and the proctitis, especially in a treatment which is a conventional treatment. And otherwise, they are generalized, like loss of appetite, a slight abdominal pain, the lowering of the blood counts. So these are not very difficult, really. But another thing which with conventional radiation we see, that is the dermatitis. So with conventional radiation, the dermatitis may be quite bad. So the patient needs to be monitored maybe twice a week to see the dermatitis area. And if needed, a proper treatment, a dressing, sometimes a dressing also is needed. And mind you, I'm talking about only conventional treatment. With IMRT, these are much, much less. One thing which I would like to, which is generally not taken care of, is the vaginal stenosis. To take care of the vaginal stenosis, whatever the age of the patient is, the patient has to be counseled that she may develop vaginal stenosis. With IMRT, we can monitor the dose, we can to the vagina, so that the chances of stenosis are less. But even then, so the patient needs to be, after the treatment is over, she needs to be said that about 10 to 12 weeks after the radiation is done, coitus needs to be, so the husband and the wife, they should be counseled together that the coitus is a must, or if it is not possible, many times it is not, then a vaginal massage or a dilator. Dilator are available everywhere, so you can teach the patient to dilate the vaginal area. So these patients, I know in India and in Bangladesh, it is very difficult to counsel the patient for a dilator. So, but you need to stress upon them. So after, if a proper dilatation is done, or a coitus is done regularly, or a vaginal massage, manual vaginal massage, so then the vaginal stenosis, we have seen, even today I have seen a patient who is unmarried and came after about 1.5 years of radiation. She has a good patulous vagina, and she could well go for her marriage or any other for her future as well. So these are the main issues which we face during the radiation, and again, most of them, they can be taken care of if the patient is counseled and the family is counseled.
Next.
Thank you very much, all, for your participation.
Thank you, Dr. Samia Alom. Now I request one of our presenters, she is Dr. Lutfa Begum, who is from National Institute. You please stop your share screen, Samia. Lutfa Begum, to present your case. She is resident from Gynae Oncology Unit in National Institute of Cancer Research and Hospital. Samia, you stop your share screen. Samia? Yes, okay. Lutfa?
Yes, madam. Am I audible, madam?
Yes,
Are my slides visible?
yes. Slide should be.
Yes, madam. Honorable Chairman, respected foreign and Honorable Chairman, respected teachers and learned audience. Assalamu alaikum. I am Dr. Lutfa Begum, President, Department of Gynecological Oncology of National Institute of Cancer Research and Hospital. Going to present my case. A 36 years normotensive non-diabetic lady, para 2+1 abortion, was diagnosed as a case of pelvic mass in April 2017. At that time, her ultrasonography of whole abdomen showed bulky uterus with fibroid and a big semi-solid mass containing echogenic structure in right adnexal region. CT scan was done and report revealed a large cystic lesion having soft tissue and fat component measuring about 10.7 into 10.2 into 12.2 centimeter noted in the presacral region, compressing and displacing rectum, uterus, bladder anteriorly. In post-contrast scan, the lesion show mild marginal enhancement. Then she underwent laparotomy followed by removal of the mass with total abdominal hysterectomy and preservation of right ovary on 30th April 2017 at a tertiary medical college hospital. Operation findings were right-sided ovary and tube normal, retroperitoneal cystic mass found in pouch of Douglas, then total abdominal hysterectomy with preservation of right ovary done. Pouch of Douglas opened. During the procedure, the mass ruptured and sebaceous material comes out. After operation, her histopathology report showed mucinous adenocarcinoma arising from teratoma. Regarding her
সবাইকে মিউট করে দেন, এছাড়া বাকিদেরকে মিউট করে দেন।
Regarding her tumor markers, C125, alpha-fetoprotein, and beta-HCG within normal limit. Then she received 6-cycle chemotherapy with paclitaxel and cisplatin up to 22nd October 2017. Now the question, what will be the adjuvant chemotherapy schedule in case of mucinous adenocarcinoma arising from teratoma?
Dr. Talwar.
Can you summarize the case in 4-5 lines, please? What is her age and what is her other personal histories?
Yes, sir. This is she is a 36 years old lady who was diagnosed as a case of pelvic mass in 2017 April. And at that time, her CT scan report showed a mass at the presacral region, which compressing and displacing the uterus, bladder, rectum anteriorly. And it is 10 into 12 into 10 centimeter. Then she underwent laparotomy followed by total abdominal hysterectomy with preservation of right ovary. And during the removal of the mass ruptured and sebaceous material comes out. After the operation, the specimens show mucinous adenocarcinoma arising from teratoma. Then patient received 6-cycle chemotherapy with injection, paclitaxel and cisplatin.
Before I answer this question, I would request Dr. Sekhon to say a few words regarding the completeness of surgery.
So I don't know whether it was a post-operative diagnosis and whether a frozen section was done or no. And that is the biggest problem, actually.
Yeah.
Most of the there's no frozen section is not available.
Yes.
And since she's a young patient, one would naturally want to preserve the other ovary, which I presume was looking normal, and a normal looking uterus. And one would also presume that, the rest of the abdomen was also normal. There were no deposits anywhere. the peritoneum was clean. So you just took out the ovary, even though it has ruptured for whatever reason, and you just, maybe did a saline wash or something and removed it off. Now, in such cases, when you get such a diagnosis of a teratoma, which presumably it seems to be an immature teratoma, and some teratomatous element, a mucinous adenocarcinoma is arising, you would have to counsel the patient very carefully, because the first step is not adjuvant chemotherapy. In fact, the first step is a completion surgery, or what one would also want to name as a staging laparotomy rather than anything else. So only after that, subsequently, one would, go in for any kind of chemotherapy, which of course has to be given.
I would fully agree with Dr. Seco, because we also come across these kind of patients very often in our clinics, and we always take an opinion from the gynae-oncologist whether the completeness of surgery is not there. If it is not there, then it is done, because the optimum staging is done after ovarian laparotomy or a proper staging laparotomy. So in this case, as Dr. Seco has said, whether the completeness of surgery is not there or not, that is suspect. Nevertheless, this appears to be a dedifferentiation from a teratoma, and from that a mucinous adenocarcinoma element has arisen. If we presume that it is what we are seeing and rest everything else is negative for a moment, suppose that a proper laparotomy has been done, then we can say it is at least stage 2, if not less. And if that is the case, then for a mucinous cyst adenocarcinoma, the choice of treatment can be between paclitaxel carboplatin, and it can be a 5-fluoxyliplatin protocol also. So these two would be my choice of treatment, provided we assume that whatever we have taken out, that is disease, and rest all is not there.
So you see, unless we do a completion surgery and we have the actual staging for the patient, it's a ham-handed kind of treatment. That is not the standard of care. So it requires some courage to tell the patient that, listen, if you want to be properly treated, and she's a young patient, she can do very well. She has also to be counseled that mucinous carcinomas don't do as well as serous carcinomas. So all the more reason why she should definitely undergo a completion surgery. She might, and if at all there is a focus somewhere lying in the omentum or somewhere else in the peritoneum or whatever, that also would be removed. A proper staging would be done, and she can be actually given and we would also want to remove the appendix since it is a mucinous carcinoma. So keeping all of this in mind, she has a good chance of a 5-year survival rate, but only if we do a proper standard of care treatment, which would be, like I'm saying again and again, a completion surgery, that is a staging laparotomy followed by adjuvant chemotherapy, which, as Dr. Vineet says, both things work well, whether you give a carboplatin or whether you want to give a folfoxygen.
So I have a question to Dr. Vineet. Is there any opportunity of mucinous where we can, and any stage where we can avoid chemotherapy with a good surgery?
No, Kamal, everything depends upon the stage. And if you have stage 1C onwards, then definitely chemotherapy helps. It gives a absolute survival benefit in any of these cases. So it is stage driven, not the surgery. And having said that, as Dr. Seco mentioned, and as I had pointed out, a proper, staging laparotomy is a must. Short of that, you don't expect any survival benefit, whatever you give under the earth. So if the patient has undergone a proper staging laparotomy, then only you can expect the kind of survival rates which you get in the books. If it is just a cytoreduction, then everything is a query.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. Only stage where one can avoid chemotherapy is basically just stage 1A. And even in those cases, we have had patients, and this is also evidence-based, that where the size of the tumor is more than 10 centimeters. But if it is a mucinous carcinoma, even if it is a stage 1A, definitely we should consider giving at least 3 cycles of chemotherapy as adjuvant treatment. Because for mucinous carcinomas, even the size of the tumor really matters, and that itself is of a prognostic significance. So we should be very careful in these cases. And if you're not going to go in for a completion surgery or staging laparotomy, just giving chemotherapy, whatever you might want to give, is half treatment only.
So what I want to
Next.
that what Dr. Rupinder and Dr. Vinit Talwar said, we make one common mistake, that is C ovary. So all C ovary is not same. So very much important to understand whether it is a serous or mucinous, number one. This is this effect on the treatment modality and also especially for the prognosis. And as Dr. Rupinder was telling, that here even it is 1A size is an issue. And again, what Vinit Talwar was telling, that when it is 1B onwards or 1C, we should give chemotherapy. And again, for selection of chemotherapy, that is the interesting part for the resident I want to bring up. That we all know paclitaxel is the gold standard for C ovary, but here, I mean, there are many data to say more about the oxaliplatin and 5-FU compared to, because it is adeno expecting from, I mean, the intestinal origin there somebody is thinking. So there are more good data of supporting for that. So what we want to emphasize here, that all CA ovary is not the same, and we should not put all or not fit all in one size. So it is mucinous is a bit different story in perspective of surgery, in perspective of chemotherapy, and also in perspective of prognosis.
Another thing I would mention for the sake of the postgraduates, that this histopathology, mucinous adeno-CA arising from a teratoma, if it has to arise from a teratoma, it is a dedifferentiated adenocarcinoma, not a de novo epithelial carcinoma of the ovary. Point number one. Point number two is, if the primary diagnosis is a teratoma, then it is a dichotomy. Teratoma would be termed as a germ cell tumor. Adenocarcinoma would be termed as an epithelial cell tumor. So these two cell lines are totally different. Either you have a teratoma or you have an adenocarcinoma. If you have an adenocarcinoma arising from teratoma, then your primary diagnosis has to be a germ cell tumor. After that, it has undergone dedifferentiation, and one of the features for dedifferentiation is a mucinous adenocarcinoma. So I think I would be inclined to take a second opinion as far as the histopathology is concerned.
Vinit very rightly said, it is definitely a dedifferentiation, and that is why the prognosis of this kind of tumor is very poor.
So, but madam, thing is that common things are common. You don't find dedifferentiation so commonly. Probably this could be one case which they have picked up, but
yeah, absolutely, it's very rare.
Yes, madam.
It's definitely called for if we can have a second look at the slide blocks and slides.
Sure,
yes.
Sure.
I love the word Dr. Vinit said, that common things are common. So it is a message that whenever we are looking for uncommon thing, always we should be cautious before declaring it rather than taking a second opinion, because uncommon thing happens very uncommonly. So whenever we are getting an uncommon thing, personally, I always prefer to go for a second opinion before declaring it that we have found a real uncommon. So we can proceed, I think.
Next.
Yes, ma'am. After chemotherapy, patient underwent laparotomy followed by right-sided salpingo-oophorectomy with omentectomy. At that time, operation findings were, after opening of peritoneal cavity, there were residual metastasis in whole peritoneal cavity. Then right-sided salpingo-oophorectomy with omentectomy and removal of metastatic deposit was done. There was suspicious tissue at vault, which was taken for histopathology. Histopathology report showed section of ovary show adenocarcinoma with calcification compatible with chemotherapeutic effect. Omental tissue show metastatic deposit with chemotherapeutic change, and section of vault tissue show no metastatic carcinoma. Then the patient received maintenance therapy with injection paclitaxel 4 weekly 6 cycle from 25th January 2018 to 28th July 2018. So now the question, was maintenance therapy with single agent paclitaxel justified for this patient?
Vinay Talar, sir.
So, Dr. Shana, my suspicion that this was not a teratoma has been proven now when you have done the second surgery. So, this is a ovarian carcinoma which has spread everywhere. Probably in hindsight now, it was not a teratoma. That is point number one. Point number two is we generally don't give maintenance therapy with the paclitaxel. It's not the standard of care, neither it gives any survival benefit. If at all we have to give, say you have given 6 cycles of paclitaxel and carboplatin, and you have done the surgery at that point of time and you find that there was residual disease, we can continue with 2 more of same, that is paclitaxel and carboplatin. And then subsequently we can leave the patient. Barring finances, if finances is not an issue, then I would definitely like to do a BRCA 1 and 2, because this is a young patient. And if it comes out to be mutant, then she will definitely have benefit from PARP inhibitors.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Lutfa, next.
Yes, madam. 2 months after maintenance therapy, during follow-up, she was presented with a mass at presacral region on 5th September 2018. CT scan report revealed mild, thick, wall-loculated cystic lesion at presacral region posterior to rectum, may be residual recurrent neoplasm or infected lymphocyte. Then exploration and excision of the multiloculated cyst at pericoccygeal region was done on 26 September 2018. The operation was done at front longitudinal incision extending from sacral to coccygeal region. The operation, histopathology revealed adenocarcinoma arising from a mature cystic teratoma. Then immunohistochemistry was done and revealed intestinal type of mucinous adenocarcinoma arising from teratoma. Now the question, what will be her further management?
Sir, please.
See, in all,
yeah.
the way that the tumor is behaving, it must have been an immature teratoma with some sarcomatous elements. For the tumor to come back within 2 months after having received full complement of treatment, you have these very, very aggressive tumors, which are often found only in the younger age group. And we have had some patients like this. In fact, I had gone for a tumor board and in All India Institute of Medical Sciences, they had exactly a similar kind of tumor. It comes back very fast and is very aggressive, and you find that it is mostly located in the sacrococcygeal region, and there's very little that you can really do for this patient. You might give her chemotherapy, but very soon resistant clones will develop and she's likely to fare rather badly. I don't know, let's see what Vineet has to say.
No, I would definitely agree with madam. This patient has a very short treatment-free interval and would label her as platinum resistant. We can give her single agent chemotherapy drugs because platinum here would not be beneficial. And she unfortunately is not going to do well. Looks like an aggressive disease.
So Dr. Vineet, I want to add one thing, that previously the 6th cycle of maintenance, for my oncology colleagues, I want to emphasize that, I mean, when we are giving some treatment and seeing a response, that is fine. But once we have given an optimum dose, thereafter chasing with additional chemotherapy, probably we are not doing any good, rather doing some harm. I mean, in the sake of just treatment, I'm going on this because as Dr. Vineet was telling, there is hardly any role of maintenance. I mean, this so-called maintenance is, I mean, with chemotherapy beyond 8 cycle, normally beyond 6 cycle, is not justified. I think that is a message should be taken by the juniors that, I mean, for the sake of treatment, sometimes patient also demand, we should not give units of treatment. we need to tell the truth that, well, this is the limitation that we are ending up. Okay, we proceed.
Okay, next.
Then colonoscopy was done and report revealed normal. According to tumor board decision, patient was on chemotherapy with FOLFOX 2 weekly, total 12 cycle up to 2nd December 2019. What will be her further treatment plan?
I would like to ask Dr. Kamal, how do you reevaluate these patients? Do you give 12 cycles flat, or you stop at 6, you do an interim assessment and then proceed?
So that was the discussion, Dr. Vineet. I was telling that, I mean, for any chemo, when it is a 6-cycle protocol, always we should do the assessment after 3 cycles, the
Correct.
response,
Correct.
predictive by marker or imaging, or at least by clinical. But just finishing the all 6 cycles or 12 cycles, that is not as that should not be. But unfortunately, as you have seen, sometimes it happens, and sometimes it happens in such a way that, say, for example, I gave the suggestion, some junior is just giving the orders without looking for the assessment. So the patient end up finishing the all cycle, then come up and we see there may not be a very good response or a partial response. So there would be some decision required in between, like at 3 cycle or 6 cycle. Very valid point. Dr.
I
Vineet,
fully
you bring
agree
up.
with you, Dr. Kamal, that we have to do an interim assessment. And after 12 cycles, what was the assessment now? Because all the future treatment plan would, be decided by the scans which were done post 12.
So, Dr. Vineet, the big challenge that we see here is that after surgery, it is very difficult to find out the response. This is number one. Number two, we don't have a great marker to see the response. And there, I mean, unless we are just thinking that we have taken a correct decision, finish the protocol, 12 cycle. Other than that, I don't think there was any visible way of doing assessment.
No, did we do a scan after 12 cycles?
Don't know.
No.
Shahana,
Next.
Shahana, was there any imaging?
Yes.
Since then, she is under regular follow-up with normal physical examination, tumor marker. And
No, that is okay, madam. After 12 cycles of FOLFOX, any imaging was done?
Yes, sir. Ultrasound was done. Only ultrasound was done.
See, that is the problem. You start comparing apples with oranges.
Yes, sir.
If you do an ultrasound later and you have a CT scan prior, then you
Yes.
are again skating on very thin ice.
Imaging,
Because
Lutha, had she imaging, advanced imaging, CT scan?
yes, madam. In between,
Yeah, okay.
she had
Yes.
My question to Dr. Vineet, there
I-
was a presacral mass which was taken out, and then they have given adjuvant. So say they finish 12 cycle and do a CT scan. Post-operative CT scan says nothing. So maybe we are not getting a great information, because if there was a total removal and then they are giving this adjuvant, as I told, there is no marker. I mean, we are not very sure that what we have done.
But invariably, we get these type of patients that patient completed, we refer the patients for neoadjuvant chemotherapy. The patients complete 6 cycles, then refer back. That is either it is persistent disease or the partial response. It's a big dilemma.
see,
for
why
us.
I'm saying this is that this is again for the benefit of the postgraduate students.
Yes, sir.
If you do an ultrasound vis-a-vis a CT scan, you leave aside the sensitivity and specificity. In ultrasound, it is more of observer dependent. The observer will see whatever the observer wants to see, and he or she will give the report. Whereas CT scan that way is unbiased. It can be read, homogeneously across, and it can be interpreted. And ultrasound, you tend to miss certain things because of the bowel gases, or if the bladder is not full, or the patient is not compliant. There are so many factors which are obviated by CT scan. So if you have done a CT scan prior, definitely there should be a CT scan at the end, and then only you should put the patient on follow-up.
Sir, my question is, when you do ultrasound and during chemotherapy, and when you go for the CT scan in a patient
So
receiving
the
chemotherapy?
message from Dr. Vineet, is that if you are doing a CT scan before a treatment, that is a chemotherapy,
Yes,
if you want to assess the response of the chemotherapy, it should be done by another CT scan. You
it
should
is
not,
after the completion of chemotherapy.
no, in
Exactly.
between.
In between, after 6 cycles, after 12 cycles, you should do a CT scan.
Yes,
In between, if it is a 6-cycle program,
yes, after,
do a
yes,
CT scan after 3 cycles to see whether it is a response to continue 3 more cycles. Otherwise, there is no reason of continuing, completing 6 cycles. Either we stop or we change the protocol. Similarly, with a 12-cycle program like FOLFOX, there we need to do it at least after 6 cycles, as Dr. Vineet was repeatedly emphasizing that giving chemotherapy without assessment of the response is not judicious. We should assess the response after 3 cycles or after 6 cycles when it is the 12-cycle protocol.
sir, I have a question. If they, after 3 cycles, if the patients have no symptoms or the her symptoms, the symptom doesn't persist and she has the tumor marker, all the tumor markers is regressing, the tumor size is regressing, and the patient's symptoms is decreasing. In that cases, and physical examination, the size, in that case, even after that, we'll go for CT scan or ultrasound.
Whenever
3 cycles?
whenever you inflict a morbidity on a patient,
Yes, sir.
whether it is chemotherapy or anything else, it has to be justified. So in this case, if you have done a CT scan, it should be complemented with a CT scan, because in these conditions, you gun for a cure. You don't gun for a palliative intent. If the intent is palliative, then you can cut corners and you can probably do an ultrasound if you find that the patient has no symptomatology of the disease. But even when you have a small volume disease left inside the abdomen, patient might not have symptoms. Point number 2,
Yeah.
CA-125 is not 100% specific and a sensitive marker for ovary. Meaning thereby, you have seen that even after doing a laparotomy, ovarian laparotomy, Dr. Sekhon will be here with me, that you find that sometimes there is a small rise in CA-125 because even the irritation of the parietes, the peritoneum, can lead to CA-125 rise. Inflammation can lead to that. Chronic disease like Cox of the abdomen can lead to rise of CA-125. So how can you justify that just by a physical examination and CA-125 the patient is okay?
Ultrasound?
Definitely. See,
Ultra
ultrasound is, I agree with you. Ultrasound is not a modality to assess the response to chemotherapy. Definitely not. It has to be a minimal, at least a CT scan. No?
Yes. Okay. Okay.
And as far as the fall in CA-125 is concerned, a
Yes.
biochemical response is the first response to any kind of chemotherapy, which
Yes.
does not mean that there is tissue response as well. So just by doing serial CA-125s, it does not really have much significance. The value of CA-25 is best when the patient is on follow-up. After completion of treatment and the patient comes to you for follow-up, that is the time where a rise in CA-125, even if it is well within normal limits, proves to be a warning sign. So that is where it has its maximum value. Or maybe at the point of initial diagnosis, where if the CA-125 is say more than 1,000, definitely we are probably looking at a carcinoma. More than 500, you might be looking at tuberculosis or something like that. So that is where CA-125 is actually placed. So imaging is important for to diagnose as well as for treatment response.
Absolutely right, what Dr. Sekhon said, and I would second it. And Dr. Kamal, this is again for the postgraduate students. Do not, for heaven's sake, take CA-125 as a guiding light for treatment of CA ovary. These markers have to be taken as an adjunct. If the clinical picture and the radiological picture with the tissue diagnosis is concomitant with the carcinoma ovary, barring cancers like choriocarcinoma or say a germ cell tumor where you have a marked rise of AFP or beta HCG, or probably a hepatocellular carcinoma where alpha fetoprotein is in thousands or lakhs. all the other cases where you have CA125, CEA, CA 19.9, they have to be taken in corroboration and not as an initial modality for diagnosis of the cancer. And as Dr. Sekho rightly said, the maximum value of these markers is when you put the patient on follow-up, where at the beginning of follow-up, when you have a normal CA125 and later on the patient becomes symptomatic, patient has a radiological evidence of disease and the CA125 is rising, then all these three factors have to be taken into account, and then you come to a diagnosis that the patient has a progression, of course, with a tissue backing. It can be a ascitic fluid tapping or a omental FNAC or whatever. So in isolation, tumor markers like CA125 have never to be taken in the decision making, only as an adjunct.
So Dr. Vinit is repeatedly telling two messages. One, we should not think that total 6 cycle is the story, because if we are not doing any good, we should not do any harm. If there is no adequate response, we should not continue, or we should change the drug, because without any response, chasing with the same drug, we are giving some toxicity but not a benefit, rather making some resistance clone. And another discussion, which is a very popular phenomenon, do a ultrasonogram, do a CS25, patient is feeling better, we are happy. That should not be. When we are doing a treatment with chemotherapy, it should be an imaging, and it should be at least a CT scan, baseline, after 3 cycles that end. Then we can really say scientifically that we achieve this portion of response. Well, and CA125 details discussed should be considered more for a follow-up tool than for assessing a treatment.
For our oncology colleague, yeah.
So we can proceed to the next.
Next.
Sir, may I add something?
Yes, please.
Actually, CT scan was done in this patient after 12 cycle FOLFOX therapy, and which was normal. Thereafter, she was her follow-up was done by ultrasound, physical examination, and tumor markers.
That is great. That was the question, but it is not at the end. Dr. Vinit was asking that if it is
after midpoint, yes, yes.
Not at the middle, that is after 6 cycle, whether
Yes.
it is working or not. Because if we are not sure, we should not continue. So we move to the next case, I think.
So thanks everyone, and thanks for patience hearing.
Now the patient is okay. She's still now she's okay.
Good luck.
Yes. Thank you. Now I request Dr. Shopna to present your case. Dr. Shopna, please. She's from Faridpur Medical College. Dr. Shopna.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes.
Are my slides visible, ma'am? Are my slides visible, ma'am?
Yes, yes, please. Go to the slideshow and proceed.
Okay. Respected chairperson, foreign delegates, and my teachers, welcome and good evening. I'm Dr. Shopna Bishwas Joy from Faridpur Medical College Hospital, presenting my case. My patient, a 35 years mother of 4 children, housewife from a poor socioeconomic family, admitted in Faridpur Medical College Hospital with the complaints of loss of appetite, pain, and heaviness in abdomen for 4 months. She was regularly menstruating, and her bladder and bowel habit was normal. She didn't give any personal and family history of breast, ovary, colon, and endometrial cancer. Her ECOG performance status was 0, and she was mildly anemic. Breast and thyroid gland was normal, and no accessory lymph nodes were palpable. On abdominal examination, a mildly tender, solid cystic mass about 20 into 12 cm with restricted mobility occupying in hypogastric umbilical, and part of right iliac region. On vulval examination, the mass was adherent with uterus and nodularity in pouch of Douglas. Her ultrasonography report revealed multiple lobulated cystic mass in pelvic cavity about 19.9 cm into 13.1 cm. And CA125 level was 151 unit per ml. Other investigation findings were normal. So she was diagnosed as a case of malignant ovarian tumor, and laparotomy followed by total hysterectomy with bilateral salpingo-oophorectomy was done on February 2020. Perioperative findings. There was hemorrhagic fluid in abdomen. There was multiple diffuse metastatic deposits in surfaces of bowel, bladder, omentum, pouch of Douglas, both paracolic gutters, subdiaphragmatic space, and pelvic side walls. Bilateral ovarian tumor was found about 7 into 6 cm in right and 13 into 12 cm in left side. Uterus was normal size and there was multiple seedlings over uterus. Total abdominal hysterectomy with bilateral salpingo-oophorectomy and infracolic omentectomy was done. Her histopathology report revealed papillary serous cyst adenocarcinoma and omental tissue involved by tumor. She received 6 cycles of chemotherapy with paclitaxel and carboplatin. Now, my question is the preoperative evaluation is adequate?
So what was the age of the patient?
Yes, ma'am.
What was the age of the patient?
The patient was 35 years old lady.
So was only a CA125 done? What about the abnormal markers?
Ma'am, actually in the patient was too much poor, and in Faridpur Medical College Hospital, there is no CT scan facilities. Only ultrasonography and CA125 marker was done. And she had no ability to do further investigations in private sector. So we only done ultrasonography and CA125 marker.
Okay, so then that's fine. If facilities are not available and so all we have, then that's all that gets done. But otherwise, if facilities are available, one would want to, since she's less than 40 years old, one would definitely want a preoperative evaluation of all the tumor markers, that is CA125, CEA, CA19.9, beta HCG, an AFP, and an LDH. No, and of course, one would want a full CT whole abdomen with contrast and a chest X-ray as well. Okay, now, does that answer your question?
Yes, next.
The case appropriate for primary cytoreductive surgery?
Yes, definitely. This case seems to be quite okay for a primary cytoreductive surgery. Though I would, in such a case, I would definitely do a supracolic omentectomy, or rather a total omentectomy rather than an infracolic omentectomy only. Not only that, I would also move the lesser omentum.
And she had the deposit in the metastatic deposit in throughout the abdominal cavity and also the gut wall, both the small gut, large gut, everywhere there is a metastatic deposit.
See, if there are metastatic deposits and you think, and your imaging is not adequate, I hope you have a laparoscope there. Because such a patient should then be evaluated intra-op by doing a diagnostic laparoscopy. And if you find that there are tumor deposits, large tumor deposits in the mesentery, which there's no expertise to remove, more importantly, if there are deposits on the surface of the bowel, especially of the small bowel, then please abandon the surgical attempt. Let this patient be given 3 cycles of neoadjuvant chemotherapy and subsequently attempt surgery and do a complete surgery. She will benefit more rather than doing this, half heart. No, it will not add to her survival at all. And you would have left behind so much of tumor and you would have delayed her chemotherapy, because you cannot give her chemotherapy till you remove the stitches. That is another 2 weeks. So we would be harming the patient rather than benefiting. So one should be very careful. If you think that the imaging is not enough, and even the ultrasound will show deposits on the mesentery. A well-done ultrasound will show up mesenteric deposits which are more than 1.5 centimeters, definitely. So in such an event, we should definitely first put in a scope and then take up the patient for surgery.
So Dr. Rupinder, can I tell that in a peripheral setup where we don't have adequate imaging to identify there was some this type of deposit, and even say we don't have a laparoscopic arrangement, so
then please do not do anything at all.
Yes.
we should
Yes,
go
please close. Do not do any surgery at all.
exactly
Yes.
as you said.
Yes.
I think
Just
And-
coming. Yeah.
that
Yeah,
is a
the
very
patient- The patient 3 of neoadjuvant chemotherapy, and after that attempt to do a surgery, you would do a much better surgery after that. It is
No,
a difficult, but it's definitely better than taking out bits and pieces from here and there and leaving a lot of disease behind. Because we have to remember that every centimeter of disease that you leave behind, you are reducing the survival by 6 months.
So, Dr. Rupinder, what I'm going to say that once there is a laparotomy done, so
Yes.
our many colleague believes that as we have opened, let me remove how much we can, at least do the THBLSO. Remaining the oncologists will take care. That is the most dangerous, wrong concept.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. No. That it's very tempting. Okay, let me do whatever little bit I can do, and then goes no. Definitely, a patient will not benefit. Just
In
close.
that case, what should
No.
they do?
Let me tell you, if you have not done any surgery, you have only opened and shut the abdomen, on day 5, your medical oncology colleague can give chemotherapy to this patient along with the stitches on the abdomen. The patient will be able to tolerate all of that very well. And she would have started actual definitive treatment by doing this, rather than doing some. And then if you have done only half the kind of surgery, left behind tumor, the patient will take so much longer to recover from such a surgery. She will be very morbid, she will have a very toxic post-operative period, and nobody will benefit from this.
So the message is, if in a peripheral center, incidentally somebody open laparotomy, find this type of, abandon the surgery, close and start chemotherapy.
But take the biopsy, and not only that, if the biopsy doesn't take it, and only do the biopsy from ovary and also the omentum and other suspicious area, then close the abdomen. Yeah.
No, there is no need to take biopsies from everywhere. Just take one biopsy.
Ovary
from
and omentum. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyone is
not even one biopsy from the peritoneum. Anywhere else you take, you will injure, you will cause blood loss, and you might have difficulty in controlling a bleed if you take just a biopsy from a diseased ovary. You would then have to the ovary. Then we are back to where we started. It is from the peritoneal deposit that you can take a very neat biopsy without causing any harm to the patient. And that is from where you should go. You will have your diagnosis. That's it.
Sometimes operation note cannot be written completely, and in that cases, I think the operation note should be clearly, it should be written, and then only the biopsy in that area. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Operation note is very important.
Absolutely.
For me, a non-surgeon, a great learning from Rupinder Sikha, that we don't need biopsy from many places. Because one cell, only adenocarcinoma is fair enough to justify our neoadjuvant chemotherapy. So we don't need to do, because the moment I touch the big areas, then we are delaying the healing and delaying the initiation of the chemotherapy.
Absolutely.
Okay, so next.
How adjuvant chemotherapy help following incomplete surgery?
That is discussed already. Next.
What will be her further plan of management?
I think we leave it to Vineet to answer, because for the plan of management, if you have done this kind of a surgery, obviously it would mean chemotherapy, and I think he would tell us what kind of chemotherapy he would want to give to such a patient now.
Yeah, see, if you don't achieve optimum cytoreductive surgery, then whichever chemotherapy you give, it is not going to be of a great benefit, because most of the time the disease is going to come back. And this patient has, carcinomatous you can say peritonitis carcinomatosa, where the whole of the peritoneum is studded with disease. So if we know this upfront, then probably we can give neoadjuvant chemotherapy and followed by surgery, as Dr. Sekhon has discussed. But having done a half-hearted surgery, then probably you can give chemotherapy, whatever, paclitaxel, carboplatin, and hope for the best.
Dr. Vinit,
I have a question too.
supplementary question here. Some of my colleagues believe that if there is a disseminated disease or a half surgery is done or something like this, adding some costly drug like bevacizumab or something will help.
Yes.
Any comment, Vinit?
No, see, it is a known fact. If you don't do an optimum cytoreduction, you don't get the survival benefit with chemotherapy or chemotherapy with targeted therapy. Having said that, she is a high-risk case. If you want, you can add bevacizumab with chemotherapy, but then with that, you only get the progression-free survival benefit. You don't get a OS benefit. And if she has so much of disease all over the abdomen, there are likely chances that she might end up with a fistula because of a sequelae of treatment with bevacizumab and bleeding, which can be life-threatening in about 2 to 5% of cases. So that risk you have to take in mind whenever you go around treating these patients, chemotherapy and targeted therapy.
So the answer that Dr. Vinit is always making the point that optimum surgery, in every case, he was always referring to Dr. Shekhar that optimum surgery, optimum cytoreduction is the secret. No great chemotherapy, no targeted therapy, no nothing, costly drug is going to replace the role of optimum surgery.
Reduction. So I have a question to Dr. Rupendra that after neoadjuvant chemotherapy or after completion of the 6-cycle chemotherapy, what type of surgery do you do? TA's BSO omentectomy with peritonectomy?
Absolutely.
Why do you go for peritonectomy in these cases?
1 minute. See, after giving neoadjuvant chemotherapy, the goal of surgery is to remove all visible disease right
Yes.
till the last centimeter. So
Yes.
no matter where the disease is, whether it is on the peritoneum or it is on the diaphragmatic peritoneum or it is on the mesentery or it is in the paracolic gutters or on the bladder, we remove all of that peritoneum. If there is no disease on any part of the peritoneum, we do not remove that peritoneum. If you go through the desktop 3 trial, you will see that even in MSKCC and wherever else, even when there is a recurrence, then also only the area portion where there is recurrence, only that is removed. We do not do a complete peritonectomy, not
Yes.
required. Having said that, if at all we are contemplating HIPEC for a patient where we are doing an interval debulking surgery, there is a small role of doing peritonectomy where you find that the disease or even burnt out disease might be there, like sand grains. There you might be justified in removing peritoneum where even gross disease does not appear to be there. Otherwise, there is no need to remove peritoneal surfaces
Yes.
which appear
Yes,
to be
ma'am.
clean.
Because we cannot remove the disease through the serosal surface of the gut wall.
Yes, by and large, we cannot remove that.
Yes,
If
yes.
at all there is large disease on the serosa of the gut wall, we should
Yes.
definitely do a resection and anastomosis.
Yes.
Because all of the gut will not be involved. There might
Yes.
be small portions of the small gut especially. And if at all there is pelvic disease wherein you might have to do a low anterior resection, if the anterior resection has been done beyond the reflection of the peritoneum at the rectoanal junction, you would have to give the patient a stoma as well. But If the low anterior section is above that level, then you don't need to give the patient a stoma. You can just do an anastomosis and get away with it.
So Dr. Rupinder, if before neoadjuvant, we knew there was an area of involvement, and after neoadjuvant, when you went for surgery, you found you don't see a visible disease. Will you remove that part, or you will just keep it behind?
No, we will not remove that part. Definitely not.
Okay.
Otherwise, point in giving neoadjuvant chemotherapy.
Yes.
Oh, got your point. Thank you.
Yes. Next.
Whether BRCA test is needed in this case?
Or definitely, BRCA test is needed in this case, and it should be done at the inception before you embark on any treatment, because it is both predictive and prognostic. And after you have completed treatment, and if she turns out to be BRCA mutant, then these cases are the ones which can be given benefit of PARP inhibitors like olaparib or rucaparib.
Next.
Now, how will we follow up her?
It is already discussed.
Yeah, standard treatment, standard follow-up regime every 3 months for the first 2 years, followed by every 6 months for the next 3 years.
Next.
If the patient developed recurrence, what will be further management?
It depends on what is the type of recurrence she develops. The treatment will depend entirely on that. If it is a very small recurrence and there is no cytis, or if the cytic fluid is less than 500 ml and the small localized recurrence, you can go in and do what is known as cytoreductive surgery followed by chemotherapy. However, if there is, say, small recurrences in several places, peritoneal surfaces and all, then of course she has to be given chemotherapy.
Is there any role of maintenance chemotherapy here?
I think we have discussed it. If you have to give maintenance treatment, the best would be PARP inhibitors if the patient is a mutant. Otherwise, we don't have any standard maintenance as the guidelines say.
Yes, sir.
How can we avoid inappropriate management in periphery where there is limited resource?
I think it's
I think
already
it's-
discussed. Yes. If you
We
have the
that,
laparoscope, yeah.
Okay. Next.
Okay. That was all my questions, and thank you all, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sapna Vishwas. Thank you very much for your nice presentation. Now, I would like to request the in charge of the Gynae and Obstetric Department in Faridpur Medical College Hospital, Dr. Kanis Fatima, to comment to her students' presentations and our about today's session. Dr. Kanis Fatima, please.
All the distinguished faculties. Hello,
Yes,
can you hear me, please?
yes,
Yes, please.
Yes, okay. All the distinguished faculties of home and abroad and all the participants, a very good evening. I am Dr. Kanis Fatima, Associate Professor on behalf of Department of Obs and Gynae, Faridpur Medical College Hospital. Faridpur Medical College Hospital is a 1,000-bedded peripheral medical college of Bangladesh government. I appreciate and like to thank all the presenters who have presented their cases in this platform. Gynecological oncology as a subspecialty, a new era for diagnosis and treatment of various gynae malignancies with proper updated guidelines and better outcomes, with thorough dissemination of facts and information and skills. I hope that we shall be able to enrich our knowledge and expertise to treat such patients. And thank you all for your patience hearing.
thank you, Appa. Thank you very much for your nice comment. Now, I would like to request Mrs. Fatima, please show your 4 questions again. And all the participants are requested to answer the 4 questions. And at the end of the sessions, we will you will be all the winners, and we will select 3 winners and all will be awarded. So all the participants are requested for poll voting.
Rhonda, poll. 30 seconds this
30
question.
seconds, yeah.
Okay, sir.
Dr. Shahana, Dr. Kamal, I would please want to be excused.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you
Yes.
so very much for inviting
Thank you
for
very
this.
much. Yeah.
Enjoyed myself
Thank you, Rupen.
always. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
First question, Shahana.
Yes.
Second.
A woman of 60 years came with ascites and large adnexal mass. Ultrasound core biopsy of adnexal mass shows papillary serous cyst adenocarcinoma. Ascitic fluid cytology was positive, and the treatment should be, that is, neoadjuvant chemotherapy followed by interval debulking surgery.
Next.
The next. Doctor, next question. Yeah. Which statement is true for the treatment of epithelial ovarian cancer? The TH with BSO with omental biopsy is adequate for early stage ovarian cancer. Chemotherapy is the single most important modality in the treatment of epithelial ovarian cancer, and optimal debulking describes the surgery where residual tumor is more than 2 centimeters. Optimal debulking surgery followed by adjuvant chemotherapy has been demonstrated to significantly improve the overall survival. Here the answer is the D, that is optimal cytoreduction debulking surgery followed by adjuvant chemotherapy has been demonstrated to significantly improve the overall survival, because the TAs with BSO with omental biopsy is not adequate for the early stage. The early stage, the treatment is the staging laparotomy, and chemotherapy is not the single most important modality in treatment of epithelial ovarian cancer. And optimal cytoreduction or optimal debulking surgery means the tumor bulk is less than 0.5 centimeters. Next. Next question. Yes. Which of the following statement is false regarding SOLO-1 trial? Participants were newly diagnosed BRCA mutant platinum sensitive advanced ovarian cancer. It is included relapsed cases of ovarian cancer. And experiment arm, the included olaparib maintenance therapy, and the results showed significantly improved prognosis, progression-free survival, that is 90% survival with olaparib. Here the answer is the B, that is, it is not the criteria. Other 3 are the criteria. That is, participants were the newly diagnosed advanced stage, the BRCA mutant sensitive advanced platinum sensitive advanced ovarian cancer, and the experiment arm was included olaparib maintenance therapy, and results showed that significantly improved the progression-free survival with olaparib. Now, Shornath, show the results, please.
Okay, ma'am.
All the winners are requested to put their phone numbers in the chat box. Otherwise, we cannot send you the prizes. Please, everybody are requested to put your phone number in the chat box. That is Afroza Khanum, Dr. Rita, and Dr. Rabia Jolie. If you are here, please unmute yourself.
Congratulations to all the winners. As we are requested that please put your phone number.
Dr. Rita, copy the phone number. Dr. Rita, you're from, I think, Afroza Khanum, she's from National Institute of Cancer Research and Hospital. Rabia Jolie, she's from Dhaka Medical College Hospital. And
Ji,
Dr.
ma'am.
Rita, you are?
Please unmute yourself, Dr. Rita.
Yeah, Assalamualaikum, sir and madam. I am from BSMO Gynecology.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now I request our scientific secretary, Dr. A.F.M. Kamaluddin, to conclude give the vote of thanks and conclude the session.
Thank you, Shahana. It is late, 11 o'clock. Thanks for arranging the tumor board. I want to thank the Faridpur Medical College for taking the pain of presenting the cases, and also the full team for being with us. It is an encouragement for us, and we learned many things from them, that how they face the challenges and treat their patient, which is quite educational for us. Thanks to all the 3 overseas faculty, Dr. Rupender, Dr. Vinit Talwar, and Sarupa Mitra, by enlightening us with their presence. And last but not the least, to all the participants from home and abroad. I see quite a few from overseas also joined in our session. With your participation, this program become a successful thing. And I'm sure that this type of interaction is always a bilateral education. And finally, I want to thank Shahana for carrying this program forward. And Oncology Club wants to carry this forward. And hopefully, inshallah, we will be meeting all next Tuesday, same time, for another session. Till then, stay safe. Thank you. Allah Hafiz. Good night.
Allah Hafiz. Assalamu alaikum.